is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need of grace, in need of love, in need of mercy raining down from high above, in need of strength, in need of peace, in need of things that only you can give to me, in need of Christ, the perfect Lamb, my refuge strong, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need of Christ, the perfect Lamb, my refuge strong, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need. I am your child, I am in need. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord.
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 And He will lift you up. And He will lift you up. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound
That saved a wretch like me. That saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
Once was lost, but now I'm found.
Was blind, but now I see. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years.
10,000 years.
When we've been there 10,000 years.
10,000 years.
Bright shining as the sun. Bright shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise.
No less days to sing God's praise.
We've no less days to sing God's praise.
To sing God's praise
Than when we first begun. Than when we first begun. So humble yourself in the sight of the Lord.
So humble yourself in the sight of the Lord.
Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord.
Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord.
And He will lift you up. I know. And He will lift you up. And He will lift you up. I know. And He will lift you up. Hear the holy roar of God resound.
Hear the holy roar of God resound.
Watch the waters mark before us now.
Watch the waters mark before us now.
Come and see what he has done for us. Tell the world of his great love. Our God is a God who saves. Our God is a God who saves. Let God arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. His enemies will run for sure.
His enemies will run for sure.
The church will stand, she will endure.
The church will stand, she will endure.
He holds the keys of life, our Lord. Death has no sting, no final word. Our God is a God who saves. Our God is a God who saves. Let God arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Our God is a God who saves. 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 Let God arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Let God arise.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweet.
Good morning and welcome to your Pathway Home. It's Matthew Allen with Jim Gershon and Kane Atkinson.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
We are so glad you've joined us an hour earlier today, at least technically. It's, I guess, with the time change. We're glad you're here. Thank you for joining us today as we going to spend the next few moments in the Word of God. And, you know, your Pathway Home is built around you. We want to hear from you this morning if you have some Bible questions or comments. We want to urge you to type those in and let us hear from you this morning, and we will be glad to respond and react to those. And we just appreciate that so much when we have our viewers typing in and listening and commenting and reacting. It means a lot to us. And we want to encourage you to do that today. Kane has got some great thoughts. Actually, this is, we shared the program together last week, and we were talking about 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15, where Peter talks about always being ready to give an answer for the hope that is within you. And we talked a lot about all that and what it means. And today's broadcast is going to kind of be a part two of that, because we got down to the end of that program and Kane had some really great questions, and I wrote them down. There's like 3 or 4 great questions that he wrote or talked about that I thought, wow, that would make for 3 or 4 very good classes or programs here for your Pathway Home. And so that's what we're going to be doing today as we stay together. Jim, it's good to have you back.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
He was down in Texas last week.
Yeah.
And we're glad that you're back with us today. We've missed you. And
Well, I miss being here, but I got to tell you something. To get away with my wife, that's a rarity. It was time well spent. Enjoyed just being with her and having the opportunity to be with other brethren. We visited 2 congregations while we were down there, and just had a great time with brothers and sisters in Christ we never met before.
So cool. Well, we're back here in the familiar setting again. Thanks again. I'll echo what Matt said. Glad to have Mr. Jim back, and all of you guys. For those of you that are regular viewers of the Pathway, we appreciate you so much. If you're just stumbling upon this for the first time, then we're real thankful that you're here too. This is a weekly spiritual boost for your Sunday morning, and we just want to get into the Word and have a conversation with you guys about really the greatness of God. At the end of the day, is what all of our broadcasts come to. And today, we want to bring you back to the reality of 1 Peter 3, which is the fact that we need to be prepared to give a defense, an answer, a response, a reason for the hope that is within us, especially in the face of a culture that is gradually becoming more skeptical, which means, well, it's good and bad. It's bad because, well, you see what happens in a society that starts moving away from God, but it is good because the more questions people ask, the more answers we can give. So we do want to dive into a lot of the big questions on this episode of The Pathway and the further continuations of that. And really the first one, that where it all starts is the conflict with any of us versus someone who doesn't believe. We don't need to get into chasing rabbits and get down all these rabbit holes. Really the beginning first question we've got to confront is there even really a God? And that has come under a lot of fire lately in our culture, and so we need to address that. Have we progressed beyond needing God? Like Nietzsche said, is God dead, right? I don't think that's the case, but what do you guys think?
Well, it certainly has changed, at least over my lifetime, and Jim, you would probably, I think, echo that. I think early on in my preaching career, most of the people that we engaged out in the culture, at least, believed in God. I mean, it was a rarity for anybody to. I mean, if a person came to you and said, "I don't believe in God," I mean, it was that they were like weird. It was different. I mean, at least for me, it was just you didn't run into that very much. At least in where I grew up and the culture around there. Now, one of the things that I've read, just to kind of back up what you're saying, Kane, is that evangelical Christianity in this country is in a serious decline. And the rise of what is the category called the nones, agnostics, atheists, whatever, that constitutes currently around 25% of the nation.
And it's growing.
And it's growing rapidly. And so what we have is evangelical Christianity going down and the rise of atheism and agnosticism going up at a rapid pace. And so the culture's changed. And if you look at the beliefs of those that are under 40, it's even faster. And so we must be better prepared in how to answer some of these questions.
Well, it's to me, intellectualism and our worship of our own intellect has become a major problem.
Definitely.
We think so highly of ourselves. You have to remember, those of us that do believe in God, there's some passages that keep us there. And one is, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. It brings us back to the fact that when you really think about it, if you really think about the concept of this being existent without a creator, is foolishness. And so the question of how we got here and how all these things exist, I think this is something that is easily understood. If I was driving a car and you said, well, where'd you get the car? I said, well, it just appeared. You would say, well, no, I just woke up one morning and it was there. You know,
there it is.
There it is.
Right now with that.
You'd say, and I said, I was thinking about, boy, I really like to have a car, and bang, there it is. Well, where'd it come from? It just happened. You would call me an absolute nut
Yeah. How'd you come to that conclusion?
How'd you come
Mr.
to that
Logan?
conclusion?
Yeah.
Yet we see a universe that is physically timed out to perfection, the rotation of the planets, all the things that scientifically are necessary for us to exist. And you know what? We say, oh, there's no God. It just absolutely happened. And then I think the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. You can't possibly look at the creation. David said it in Psalms 19. Just the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. The evidence of a creator is that the creation exists.
Absolutely. And we this is a really powerful evidence. In 1 Peter 3, what people are asking you for, and that's on your screen right now, is the reason you would believe, right? And we're supposed to be ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks. That's what it says in 15. And then you go to the next part of the verse. I don't know, do we have that on the presentation? We do. It says we should do this with gentleness and reverence. So, the Bible has said, you have to be foolish to not see this. And yet still, we've got to tread very lightly, according to Peter, on how we talk to people about this issue, because if it's true, it's the most important thing, period, because it'll change the entire trajectory of your life, because it stops becoming about me and my intellect and all my accomplishments and achievements, starts becoming about God, because if he's out there, now I'm losing my pleasure quest and I'm now on a God quest. I have to do that. That's what the claims on my life belong to him if he's real. So when we're giving a reason, we do point to things like the creation, and that's the first place I would go, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Mr. Jim, because the evidence is all here, right? When you look at reality, there is a really good explanation for reality, and it's God.
Yeah, I really think this is a great subject, because what happens, and what you just said, Romans 1 defines what happens to man. Man gets rid of the concept of God because he wants to be God himself. And so we don't want to answer to anybody, because if there is a God who created everything, and we are created by him and in his image and his likeness, then what's our responsibility?
It's to him.
It's to him.
Yeah.
He has the inherent right to rule over all things in the creation, and we are his creation, and we are answerable to him. So what has happened in intellectualism is, let's get rid of the concept of God, so that I'm the highest form of life that exists, and I answer to nobody at all. And so the end result of that intellectualism is that you have no value, because the only value that exists is what I give it. So they're all worried about equal rights and having equal rights in this world. Well, I got to tell you something. If I'm number one, you don't have equal rights.
Yeah.
I am superior. And the mentality that man is superior to another man comes from the idea that we are God himself. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is we do away with the real creator, and we make ourselves, and we make the images that we want to become God. And that's a scary thing. That's a situation that will lead to destruction for everyone.
No, certainly.
Well, and if you look here, I mean, Romans 1:20, and following that, what you're talking about, Jim, I think is taught clearly here by Paul. No one has an excuse. God has clearly revealed himself. We've already said that through the creation. We can know there is a God. And that's basically what Paul is teaching here in Romans 1:20. And the whole progression from Romans 1:18 down to the end of the chapter is that when a world turns away from God, Paul spells it out very clearly as to what happens.
Yeah, because and the simplicity of the conclusion that there has to be some kind of creative force is a natural deduction, but like Mr. Jim touched on, like Matt just touched on, the idea that there is something with, like what Paul said in Romans 1:20 that Matt just put on your screen, that has eternal power and a nature that is greater than our own. That is an earth-shattering thing, and simultaneously it's extremely, I I believe, obvious when we go into the evidence. Again, I once spoke with another minister who said it like this: if we don't agree about Genesis 1:1, though, I shouldn't press forward any further in a conversation with someone until we can move beyond that passage, right? In the beginnings, God created the heaven and the earth. We can talk about whether or not you like that God, you think he's good. We can talk about what his identity is, or is he the God of Christianity or Judaism or Islam, or is he some ethereal force, or we can talk about all that. But before that, we've got to go back to the very beginning of the conversation, especially with someone who is in this secular mindset or intellectualist, humanist mindset, as they don't believe that there's anything higher than a man. And so we've got to go back and say, so if there was a God, would you be willing to explore that possibility? And would you really be willing to look at the evidence? Because my faith is not based on, well, what have we always heard? Well, why do you believe in Jesus? I just believe. Well, that's not really an answer. That's a non-answer. So we have to do a little bit better than that when we get into these conversations. And again, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with like a childlike faith, but it was Paul who said, no longer be children. Go on and deepen your understanding of why you believe what you believe and confront those doubts. So that's a responsibility that we all have, especially when if we don't confront the doubts, people are going to make us confront those doubts when they question us on what we believe.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to really set up this discussion about intellectualism versus those that are believing God. There's two separate faiths in the world. There's only two. One, the existence of God, and the other, the existence of natural force, which is unexplainable. When you go back to the general theory of evolution, it's a faith. Nobody was here.
Absolutely.
Nobody was here when they claimed the Big Bang, and the Big Bang wasn't even talked about until the early 1900s. It was a theory that came about. But now we have all this Big Bang or whatever it is. Whatever happened, these theories come out. But believe me, those are all faiths, because nobody was there when the earth was formed. I love it when Job has all these questions, and God in chapter 38 of Job starts asking questions. Well, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Well, I didn't exist. Just ask a scientist that believes in general evolution, or this just happened, where were you when it all happened? Well, it's a theory. It's a faith. So they will look down their noses at you because you believe in a mind that created all things. And when we need to recognize it's a faith on their part, and it's a convenient faith, because if there is not a creator, they're not responsible to anybody. They don't have to answer for anything.
Yeah.
And so to me, not believing in God is a way out of responsibility in life, and treating other people as they're made in the image of God. We can be without excuse for doing anything that we want to do because it's just me. There's no God. And it's kind of scary because they want you to believe that general evolution is factual. It's not factual. It's a guess. It's a theory.
Evolution between the species and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
One of the things I just thought of, and I'm sure there are some of you that are watching this morning that have been down to the Creation Museum on the
really beautiful.
northern side of Cincinnati, or the southern side of Cincinnati, northern Kentucky. And,
Love that.
And when you walk in, or at least in years past, when you walk in, the first thing that they do is you kind of walk into an area and you imagine you're in the Grand Canyon. And one of the things that they really emphasize there from the very beginning of this is that evolutionists and creationists both have the same set of facts to work with. And what happens is we examine the same set of facts, and then we come away with different conclusions because of different worldviews and perspectives. But the idea of going out to the Grand Canyon area, that area of northern Arizona and southern Utah, and looking at all that, I mean, you can observe all sorts of facts that prove that there was a biblical flood and all of that. if you start with the Bible and you start with God. If you don't, you can look at those same facts and come up with millions and millions of years. And so our challenge, and Kane, I think you mentioned this a moment ago. I know we have Genesis 1:1 on the screen here. Our challenge is, what starting point are we going to use? And who are we going to elevate to the top? Is it going to be us and our theories, or is it going to be God who sets it forth? And I think it's valid that both are systems of faith, and we have to make up our mind as to which one we're going to subscribe to. Let's see who. This Jay wrote in, and he says, science and the scriptures go hand in hand.
Right.
And we fought for generations, though, that they were against one another. And I think that's true.
Definitely.
And I think it's very important that we don't set this up as anti-science. And that's one of the things I think that has been so impressive with some of our friends in the evangelical world that have really taken the time to show that science and Scripture can go hand in hand.
Yeah, and you look at, for example, what you just said, Jay, and the science. I guess science is a process, all right? Scientists are the ones who say something about the science that they do, and science is wrong all the time. It's not to be anti-science, because I'm very much a fan of science and the process or the method that is science. But almost my fear is in the culture today, we have lifted up science as some sort of standard of absolute truth. Well, that's what the science says. Okay, well, I'm with you. Let's go through it and walk me through how you came to the conclusion you came to scientifically. If you can prove something empirically with science, I'm happy to sit there and listen. But there was a time where scientists believed that the Earth was flat. Some people still believe that now, but largely people have changed. Science has changed. The science as a whole, scientists have changed their opinions over time on a whole host of issues. So, I think science is reliable. Don't get me wrong, but it's not all reliable.
Yeah. Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt your thought, but you're on this idea. And let me just say this: scientific principle is in connection with the Bible. They correspond every time. And people say, well, no, they don't, because you have miracles. Well, miracles are not about science. Miracles go against what is natural. Science is a study of the natural world, and scientific principles are facts. But we want to state theory as being facts. Science wants to state theory as being facts. And people really don't want to stick to science. The fact is, they'll use science as escape to say there is no God and that everything just happened. But look at our society. When does man appeal to science? Mm-hmm. Well, we got this big question right now. How many different genders are there?
Yeah.
Science says there's two.
Right.
But man doesn't say there's two, because man only uses science when it fits his narrative so that he can do whatever he wants to do. Right. So the question really comes down here, if you're going to claim science as your basis, first of all, use scientific fact, not theories. And there is nothing in the scriptures that contradict scientific facts. They're not one thing. And I believe one thing that shows the inspiration of the scriptures is it is in conjunction with scientific fact. There's nothing stated in the scriptures that would violate a scientific principle. But what happens is man violates scientific principles by using his own thought to justify his own ways. So this idea of eliminating God, they eliminate science when it's convenient too. So
yeah. Well, I read this on Twitter the other day, so it has to be factual.
Yeah.
Well, Bill Nye tweeted it, so it must be true.
But I did read that the White House is considering changing on their official documents that list out the sex of an individual to go from 2 to 3, and that is coming. And the question was, so what about the science? And I thought that was well put, because Jim, as you're saying, we can ignore science when we want to if we have an agenda that trumps it. So, Kane, we have all these notes here that we wrote in prep for this, and one of the things, I have Genesis 1:1 on the screen here. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And right here from the beginning, the Bible makes a powerful statement about there is a God. He is real. He is a person. He is powerful. He is the giver and sustainer of life. I mean, the Bible just trumpets that right from the very beginning. So how do we go from there as far as, if we go back to this 1 Peter 3:15 passage of making a defense, how do we do that from this passage?
Well, so you look at Genesis 1:1, and I want to present evidence in a conversation. So someone says, why do you believe in God? And I want everyone to be able to say this. That question doesn't make me clam up, divert the conversation, not know how to. It's very simple, right? We have a universe that has order, rhyme, reason, beauty, life in it. Creation itself is the strongest evidence that there is a creator. And I know some people say, oh, well, that's just random chance. And we kind of touched on this a little bit in the conversation. So what we have to do is we have to examine two opposing narratives. Now, we already preliminarily had a little bit of discussion here, and probably, again, if you're sitting across the table from someone, you probably do need to have some preliminary discussion as well that, listen, this is a matter of faith. We can talk about science, but once you start making claims about things like materialism, to say everything that was made, everything that is here is all that there is, that is matter. When you start making claims like there is no God, or it doesn't make sense to believe in God, or there's no evidence for God, then you've left the realm of the scientific method and you've moved into the realm of philosophy and theology and theodicy. So you've come into, not to be rude, but you've really stepped into our arena, church people, when you've done that. Because when you make a claim about atheism, you might say you're agnostic, which is, I don't know, I haven't really examined the evidence. But when you start saying the evidence leads me to the conclusion that there's probably not a God, well, now you've stepped into the theological realm, which is not, the basis is not what does science say, the basis is what makes more sense to believe with the evidence about God. And so you have law, order, rhyme, reason, beauty, life, you have all these things, and the question is, who ordered the universe? Who made the moral law that's implanted in our heart? And where did life come from? People trace all this back to the Big Bang, but the Big Bang just gets you, and this is something we don't really talk about, but just because you can say that there was a Big Bang, okay, now you've just made the problem go one step backward, because now, well, the question is, where did the Big Bang come from?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you didn't really solve anything with that. You didn't get to the beginning of the narrative.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people miss is there's like two theories, like we said, either mind's eternal and created all things, or matter's eternal and nobody knows how matter's generated. I say this to my students when I'm teaching sometimes. This is a pen. I ask them what this is, and they say, well, that's a pen. What's it for? It's for writing. I said, okay, let's set it right there. Let's watch it write. And I'll say, I'll look at it for a while. I'll say, how long will it take for that pen to write?
Maybe we should poke it with a stick.
Yeah.
See what happens.
that piece of matter will never write until a mind picks it up and uses it.
It makes a decision, a personal decision.
It makes a decision. The idea that matter is eternal and having nothing that forms it or shapes it is just ludicrous, and it's totally against what we understand. We understand everything that we see that's invented, somebody put it together. Mm-hmm. Mind had power over the materials to put it together. Yet we look at this. The one I love is Sir Isaac Newton had a model of the solar system, and there was a crank on it. And one of his friends came in, and here's the sun in the middle of it, and you'd crank it, and the planets would go around this model. And the guy said, well, who made this? And Newton looked there and said, nobody. And the guy said, you must not understood me. Who made this? And Newton said, nobody. He goes, I'm not a fool. Somebody had to make this. He said, that's a mere model of the real thing, and you say nobody made it. see, now the concept is using just plain logic. That model, somebody had to create it.
It's a lot easier to believe that than the other thing.
That's right. And so it's much easier to believe. You know, there's a couple comments on here I think we need to look at. I appreciate Nathan's comment. The lives of those who claim faith may have much more to do with the society going away from God than we are comfortable admitting. We can examine the facts, science, all we want. But if our lives, speech, and attitude aren't providing a meaningful defense for the hope within us, our argument about the facts are simply intellectual pride as well.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, that's a real...
That's well said.
Yeah, it's well said. Our lives should show evidence of the Creator.
It should be, there is a defense there, in a passive defense, I guess, Nathan, you would say, where I'm not doing anything but just following Christ, and that's to me, I've always said this, it's the most underrated apologetic that there is, which is I'm just walking with Jesus with all my heart, and my life is being changed. I am becoming a better, more decent person that adheres to that moral law that's written on my heart, and people can see that happening. And it may upset them, it may cause them to question me, and then I may have to give a more active defense. But I totally agree that our actions are in their own selves a defense.
You know, it's the same thing when we start talking about social issues. The complaint is that Christians can rail against homosexuality and those kind of sexual sins and sexual immorality in the church and all of the above, and yet we have the larger numbers of people divorcing and immorality in our own marriages and that kind of stuff. And the basis made you people are just a bunch of hypocrites. And you know, and there's a kernel of truth with that.
Yeah, we are.
And
so are you. So we've got room for one more. Come on down.
And the idea here is that we're all sinners.
Yeah.
But I think Nathan's point is very powerful in the fact that there is something about this that I think it's what got the Christians noticed in the first century. It's because they lived it.
Yeah.
They believed it. It stood out. And we're rapidly approaching a world that's going to be similar in a lot of ways to that, I think, in our own world, where Christianity is going to stand out. It's going to be very, very different from the way the rest of the world is going. And people will notice, and that's going to give us that opportunity to talk.
It is. And Becky Pinnock writes in, believing in God is easier than believing that there is no God. And so, the camp, there's a swelling that these individuals are saying, there is no God, or I don't believe that there's good enough evidence. And I'll say, for someone who's already admitted, I've already presupposed the conclusion that there isn't a God, and I'm not willing to look into that. That's okay, that you can go on your own way. But if you really want to know the answer for why I believe, this would just be my reason, is it makes a lot more sense that the creation has a creator, or that the universe that is finite has something infinite, outside of it that initially flipped the switch on. If you're willing to look at some of the evidence with me, give me 2 or 3 sessions in a coffee shop and we can go back and forth, you know. That's the beginning of maybe a long string of conversations that eventually leads to the foot of the cross, which is where we're always going in Christ. And to Matt's point, that's where the first century church was going. They were glad when people asked them questions about their faith, and they were glad to give their lives even when those questions were disingenuous and they were being left over to the hands of Romans. They testified before honest and dishonest men of what they'd seen, and we need to be fully prepared and equipped to do the same thing. So my final admonition for this program, again, something you can look into, is the things like the cosmological argument, the moral argument for God's existence. We've all just scraped all these issues today, but get some apologetics under your belt, because I'm telling you, you're going to need them, and people want to know.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And, again, it's a much different starting point than it used to be. We're going back to some things that I think some of us in older generations have taken for granted. And all it is that the starting point has shifted. And we used to assume all of these things, that people had the same basic beliefs as we do, that God exists and that eternity is real and that there's a coming judgment and so on and so forth. Now that is viewed as superstition. It's viewed as hampering and holding back. There's just all sorts of different terms and slurs that people are using now to refer to Christianity. And so we need to be ready for that in talking about why God exists and what he means to me. And I want to just go back to this real quick. Well, we had it here. Our universe, I think this is one of the best arguments you've got. Complex design, law, order, rhyme and reason, beauty, life, and creation itself as a whole. We just changed our clocks this morning, and the sun came up an hour. Let's see, did it come up an hour later this morning, I guess. And so we all got to watch the sunrise this morning, at least us here walking back and forth over to the office, and it was really pretty. But you know what? Because science tells us that tomorrow the sun is going to rise at 6:42 in the morning.
There's a law.
There's a law there. Now, how did that come about? And it is with preciseness. And that right there, that exactness is something that should really testify. I'll throw this out real quickly. In 1986, Halley's Comet came through. And I remember going in the backyard of my grandparents with a telescope and setting it up at the dusky, dark time and looking through that telescope and seeing Halley's Comet. And I remember thinking, I will be 92 years old the next time it comes, and I want to see it again. So there you go. But we can predict that all the way through, and know that I think it's 86 years or something, or 76 years, I can't remember. Somebody will tell me. But every so many years it comes through. We know that with specificity. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is great evidence.
It is.
That there's a God.
It is. Well, it's been a really a good conversation, I think. I appreciate all the comments that have come through. There's a lot more to go into on this. Like I said, we really have only scratched the surface, but we're probably going to progress forward in the next program, I think, guys. We'll probably do a huddle after this and talk about what we want to do. But we need to have these conversations with people. And I just want to chuck this out here, guys, as we kind of begin to wrap up. This is my kind of closing statement is, if you've got kids, young adults, you need to talk to them as well about this, because if you're not discipling them, the world, and YouTube, TikTok, heaven forbid, the world is. So ask them, look, do you know why we believe in God? And talk to them through, show them a tree, show them the complexity of the design, show them Halley's Comet and the stars that are in the sky, and tell them about the glory of the Creator who made all these things, because we're in for a little bit of a battle going forward. It's not going to get easier, but this is where it all begins. Is there a good God out there, and how did we get to here right now?
So we appreciate you tuning in this morning for our broadcast, and want you to know that we'll be back, Lord willing, next Sunday morning to do this all over again and talk more about this topic and maybe some other things that are very relevant to this discussion. We want to encourage you to come back here within the hour. We'll be back for our morning Bible classes and our worship service. If you are in Dayton this morning or somewhere in southwestern Ohio, we'd love it if you'd come join us in person today. 9:30 and 9:45 is when our Bible class period begins, and then 10:45 is our worship. We're at 5051 Wilmington Pike, just a minute off of Interstate 675, exit 7. You cannot miss us when you go north up that road just past Costco on your left. We would just love you to be a part of this worship assembly today. If you are more remote than that, you can't get up here in time, then we're going to be here virtually too. And we would encourage you to join our live stream today and worship along with us as we do that each and every week. Thank you for being here. Jim, thank you. We'll see you next week. God bless.
When I'm down, Lord, you pick me up. Then I fall on my knees. When I'm dry, Lord, you fill my cup. You always give what I need, and yours, Lord, I'll always be. When everything's right, I will praise you. In seasons of joy, I will sing, and even in trials, I'll still raise you. For you are my glorious King. Yes, you are my glorious King. When I'm up and blessings abound, and your grace falls like rain. When your love and mercy surround, Lord, I will praise you again, my God, Redeemer and friend. When everything's right, I will praise you. In seasons of joy, I will sing, and even in trials, I'll still praise you. For you are my glorious King. Yes, you are my glorious King. You came for me in the form of a man, bearing my sins on a cross, taking the shame and fulfilling the plan. How could I not respond? How could I not respond? When everything's right, I will praise you. In seasons of joy, I will sing, and even in trials, I'll still raise you. For you are my glorious King. When everything's right, I will praise you. In seasons of joy, I will sing, and even in trials, I'll still praise you. For you are my glorious King. Yes, you are my glorious King. Yes, you are my glorious King. Before even time began, my life was in His hand. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls, and hears me when I call. I have a Father. He calls me His own. He'll never leave me, no matter where I go. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls, and hears me when I call. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls, and hears me when I call. He hears me when I call. Once I was lost, wandering in darkness.
no life inside, no hope inside. He called my name and healed my blindness, set me ablaze. Now I'm alive with His love breaking through my heart of stone, love breathing to awake my bones, love reaching out to save my soul, love never gonna let me go. And now my heart, so full of worship, I can't hold back, I can't contain it, for all He's done. Jesus my Savior, I am ablaze and full of thanks for His love breaking through my heart of stone, love breathing to awake my bones, love reaching out to save my soul, love never gonna let me go, love calling me as I am, love making me new again, love lifting me when I can, love never gonna let me go. Wherever you've been, whatever you've done, come as you are, come into His open arms. Wherever you've been, whatever you've done, come as you are, come find His love breaking through my heart of stone, love breathing to awake my bones, love reaching out to save my soul, love never gonna let me go, love calling me as I am, love making me new again, love lifting me when I can, love never gonna let me go, love breaking through my heart of stone, love breathing to awake my bones, love reaching out to save my soul, love never gonna let me go, love calling me as I am, love making me new again, love lifting me when I can, love never gonna let me go, love never gonna let me go, love never gonna let me go. Holy words long preserved for our walk in this world, they resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart, words of life, words of hope, give us strength, help us go in this world where'er we roam. Ancient words will guide us home. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Holy words of our faith, handed down to this age, come to us through sacrifice. Oh, heed the faithful word of Christ. Holy words long preserved for our walk in this world, they resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Ancient words